November 16th, Saint Margaret of Scotland, a saint for service to the poor. Saint Margaret of Scotland, 1045 to 1093, the granddaughter of an English king, was born in Hungary when father was in exile. Her early years were spent in the Hungarian court among pious and observant Catholic royals. Her great uncle, Saint Edward the Confessor, who had succeeded her grandfather, was near death in 1257, and Margaret's family returned to their native England, since her own father was considered a possible successor to his childless uncle. Hardship struck the family yet again when her father died immediately upon arriving back to the land from which he had been exiled years before. Though a succession of battles and shifts of power, her family lost the English throne, and Margaret's family fled for safety to Scotland. There, in 1070, Malcolm III, King of Scots, married Margaret, desiring a bride who was as a descendant of the Anglo-Saxon throne. Together, they had 8 children, 3 of whom would succeed their father on the Scottish throne. The comfortable and lofty life of royals was undesirable to Saint Margaret in many ways, and she sought with all her ability to use her status as a means to better the lives of others spiritually and materially. Margaret was a model of Christian virtue by her personal example of holiness, tact, humility, and prudence. She was able to greatly influence kings and nobles, including her own husband. Her noble and royal status was not, after all, what constituted Saint Margaret's saintliness. Rather, she was canonized in 1250 on account of a life of holiness. Regarded as a strong woman of valiant character, Saint Margaret was convicted intensely in the faith and was a devoted wife and mother. She knew hardship and suffering, and she embraced them with great virtue. Saint Margaret's piety was evident in the considerable amount of time she spent in prayer. The saint also illustrated the importance of silence and solitude when she would often retreat to the cloister of a cave for occasions of prayer and quiet reflection. Saint Margaret was a voracious leader, particularly of spiritual material. Her husband, who was illiterate, greatly admired his wife's appetite for books. The sacraments, especially the celebration of the Mass, was most important to the Queen. It is said that there were days when she attended as many as 6 Masses. Saint Margaret would perform charitable acts for the poor. In loving and honoring them, she was loving and honoring Christ. These included washing their feet and serving them food. Saint Margaret was always quick to make a connection between her acts of service to the lowly as an act of sacrifice and worship. She often would be found going to the church so that she could offer up her service in praise of God. The Scottish royal couple set an example for their guests when typically they chose to serve guests before they would eat themselves. Although her husband was not particularly religious, Saint Margaret was unafraid to effectively use her influence with him to advance several projects for the service of the Church. She was instrumental in establishing a ship for the transportation of pilgrims, and she advocated for a more dedicated observance of the Sabbath throughout the empire. Saint Margaret was a great supporter of Benedictine life in Scotland. She knew the importance of monasteries and their contributions to society, and so she invited the Benedictines to establish a new monastery and was also instrumental in bringing reform and new life. Saint Margaret's husband and eldest son were killed in a siege attack on November 13, 1093. The widow learned of the news on her own deathbed. It is believed that a life of austerity and fasting took a toll on her body, and the grievous news had broken her heart. She died 3 days later. Saint Margaret of Scotland is the patron saint for service to the poor.